The Colorado River roared like a hungry beast beneath Madeline Vance as she clung to the saddle horn of her panicked mare. The rushing waters had seemed shallow at the crossing, a cruel illusion that collapsed the moment her horse's hooves lost purchase on the slippery riverbed. Now, both woman and animal were fighting against the current, the spring snowmelt turning the normally passable ford into a death trap. "Help!" she screamed, though her voice was lost beneath the thunder of the water. Her sodden skirts weighed her down as the mare struggled, eyes white with terror, nostrils flaring. The year was 1878, and Madeline had left Denver 3 days ago, determined to reach her uncle's ranch near the Arizona Territory border. Independence had seemed so important than refusing the escort her family had arranged, insisting she could make the journey alone. Now, as the powerful current separated her from her mount, that independence felt like foolishness. Her fingers slipped from the saddle horn. The mare whinnied in panic as Madeline fell backward into the churning water. The shock of cold stole her breath. She flailed wildly, breaking the surface only to be pulled under again, tumbling helplessly downstream. Suddenly, another splash sounded nearby. Through water-blurred vision, Madeline glimpsed a man plunging into the river from horseback. Strong arms encircled her waist as she surfaced again, gasping. "Kick with me! Don't stop fighting!" the man shouted over the roar. His voice was deep and commanding, giving her something to focus on besides her terror. "Keep kicking!" Madeline obeyed, finding renewed strength as they battled the current together. Her rescuer was swimming at an angle toward the shore, using the current rather than fighting directly against it. The riverbank seemed impossibly far away, but with each desperate stroke, they moved closer. "Almost there," the man encouraged, his arm still firmly around her waist. "Don't give up now." Her lungs burned, muscles screaming with exertion, but Madeline kicked harder. When her feet finally scraped against the riverbed, relief flooded through her. The man helped her stagger to the shore, where they both collapsed on the muddy bank, coughing and gasping. "Thank you," she managed between ragged breaths, pushing her sodden hair from her face. For the first time, she got a clear look at her rescuer. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the summer sky. His dark hair, plastered to his head by the river water, curled slightly at the ends. He wore the practical attire of a cowboy denim pants, a cotton shirt now transparent from the water, and boots that had somehow remained on his feet through the ordeal. "Zachary Eaton," he said, extending a dripping hand. "Most folks call me Zach." "Madeline Vance," she replied, accepting his handshake. His palm was calloused, but warm despite the river's chill. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Eaton." Zach shook his head, water droplets flying from his hair. Any decent man would have done the same. He looked back toward the river. "Your horse made it across, looks like. Mine, too." He pointed to where both animals stood on the opposite bank, her mare still trembling visibly even from this distance. "We'll need to find another crossing," he said, rising to his feet and offering his hand to help her up. "There's a bridge about 2 miles downstream, if I recall correctly." Madeline accepted his assistance, acutely aware of her bedraggled state. Her traveling dress clung to her body, her hair hung in sodden ropes, and her boots squelched with every step. "I don't know how to thank you." "You can thank me by telling me what a lady like yourself is doing out here alone," Zach said, his tone gentle but his eyes serious. "These parts aren't safe for solitary travelers, especially with the river running high." As they began walking downstream, Madeline explained her journey to her uncle's ranch, Copper Creek. To her surprise, Zach's expression brightened. "Copper Creek? That would be William Vance's spread?" When she nodded, he continued, "Well, that's something. I'm headed in that direction myself. I've got business with the R Ranch neighboring your uncle's land." "What kind of business?" Madeline asked, her teeth beginning to chatter as the breeze chilled her wet clothes. Zach shrugged off his vest, which had somehow dried faster than the rest of his attire, and draped it over her shoulders. "I'm a horse trainer by trade. R's owner, Richard Reynolds, has commissioned me to work with some new stock he's acquired." "You train horses?" Despite her discomfort, Madeline's interest was piqued. My uncle wrote that he's been expanding his stables as well. It's what I do best, Zach replied with a modest smile. Been working with horses since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. He glanced at her shivering form. We should get a fire going before we head to the bridge. You'll catch your death in those wet clothes. Madeline couldn't argue with that logic, though propriety demanded she maintain some objection. I don't have a change of attire with me. My bags are with my horse. We'll remedy that soon enough. Zach pointed to a small grove of cottonwoods set back from the riverbank. Let's get you warmed up first. Within minutes, Zach had gathered dry wood and started a small fire. The flames danced cheerfully, and Madeline stretched her hands toward the welcome warmth. If you don't mind my asking, Zach said as he arranged stones around the fire pit, why travel alone? The stagecoach runs close to your uncle's ranch. Madeline sighed, feeling foolish under his questioning gaze. I wanted to prove something, I suppose, to my family, to myself, that I'm not just some delicate flower who needs constant protection. She laughed ruefully. And then I nearly drown in the first river I encounter. Zach's expression softened. Takes courage to set out alone, regardless of the outcome. Most women of your station wouldn't dare. My station? Madeline raised an eyebrow. You presume much about me, Mr. Eaton. Your speech, your manner, Zach replied, unabashed. You're educated. Your clothes, though currently resembling a drowned rat's, are finely made. You're not a frontier woman, at least not yet. Madeline couldn't help but smile at his assessment. I was raised in Boston, then moved to Denver with my parents 5 years ago, my father's in banking. She hesitated, then added, I'm visiting my uncle partly to escape the parade of suitors my mother insists on introducing me to. Zach's eyes crinkled with amusement. Not keen on marriage, Miss Vance? Not keen on marrying for convenience or status, she corrected. My mother believes at 22 I'm in danger of becoming a spinster. The horror, Zach teased, turning to add more wood to the fire. As the day progressed, they traded stories while their clothes dried in the warm afternoon sun. Zach, she learned, was 26 and had grown up on a small ranch in Texas. He'd spent years working cattle drives before discovering his talent for gentling even the most difficult horses. There's a language to it, he explained, his face animated with passion, understanding what the horse is thinking, feeling. Earning trust instead of demanding obedience. By the time they reached the bridge and crossed safely to retrieve their horses, Madeline found herself strangely comfortable in Zach's company. There was something refreshingly honest about him, a quality rarely found among her usual social circle in Denver. Shall we make camp for the night? Zach suggested as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. We can reach Copper Creek by midday tomorrow if we start at dawn. Madeline hesitated. Camping alone with a man she'd just met, regardless of the circumstances, was hardly proper, but the alternative was riding through unfamiliar territory in the dark. I have a tent in my pack, Zach added, seeming to sense her discomfort. You can have it to yourself. I'm perfectly fine sleeping under the stars. His consideration decided the matter. Thank you. That would be best. They found a suitable clearing not far from the trail. While Zach tended to the horses, Madeline gathered wood for another fire. The domestic routine of setting up camp felt strangely natural, as if they'd done this many times before. Over a simple supper of jerky, hardtack, and coffee, Zach asked about her plans at Copper Creek. Uncle William has invited me to stay the summer, Madeline explained. After my near drowning today, I'm not certain he'll think me capable. Near drownings have a way of teaching valuable lessons, Zach observed, like checking the depth of a river before crossing. Madeline tossed a small stick at him, which he dodged with a laugh. Very amusing, Mr. Eaton. I assure you that particular lesson is firmly etched in my mind. As night fell, true to his word, Zach set up his small canvas tent for her use and prepared his own bedroll some distance away beside the fire. Madeline retired to the tent, listening to the chorus of night insects and the occasional soft nickering of the horses. She should have been exhausted after the day's ordeal, but sleep eluded her. Through the tent opening, she could see Zach's profile against the firelight. He sat motionless, staring into the flames, occasionally taking a sip from his tin cup. There was something compelling about him, not just his timely rescue or his obvious competence in the wilderness, but a quiet integrity that seemed rare in this frontier land, where men were often defined by their ability to intimidate or dominate. Morning arrived with birdsong and the aroma of fresh coffee. Madeline emerged from the tent to find Zach already awake, frying bacon in a small pan over the rekindled fire. "Sleep well?" he asked, offering her a cup of steaming coffee. "Well enough," she replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "You're up early." "Habit," he explained. "On the ranch, days start before dawn." They broke camp efficiently and set off toward Copper Creek as the sun climbed above the eastern mountains. The landscape was breathtaking, vast expanses of sagebrush plains, giving way to pine-covered foothills, all beneath a sky so blue and enormous it made Madeline feel insignificant by comparison. "It's beautiful," she murmured, more to herself than to Zach. "That it is," he agreed, riding beside her. "Different kind of beauty than Boston or Denver, I'd wager." "Wilder," Madeline said, "less constrained." "Like you?" Zach suggested with a sidelong glance. The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. "Perhaps I'm trying to be," she admitted. By midday, they crested a ridge, and Zach pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled in a verdant valley below. Smoke rose lazily from a chimney, and cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. "Copper Creek," he announced, "looks peaceful from here." As they approached the ranch, Madeline felt a curious mixture of excitement and regret. Her adventure with Zach was coming to an end, and soon she'd be under her uncle's watchful eye. A man emerged from the main house as they rode into the yard, tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. William Vance's weathered face broke into a wide smile at the sight of his niece. "Madeline," he called, striding forward to help her dismount. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow at the earliest." His smile faltered as he noticed her companion. "And who might this be?" "Uncle William, this is Zachary Eaton," Madeline said, squeezing her uncle's hand warmly. "He saved my life yesterday when I attempted to cross the Colorado and underestimated its current." William's expression shifted from suspicion to gratitude. He extended his hand to Zach, who dismounted and accepted the handshake. "Then I'm deeply in your debt, Mr. Eaton. My niece is precious to me." "Any decent man would have done the same," Zach repeated his earlier sentiment. "I'm just glad I was nearby when it happened." "Mr. Eaton is a horse trainer," Madeline added. "He's headed to the RRR to work with their new stock." William's eyebrows rose with interest. "Is that so?" "Richard mentioned he'd hired someone." He studied Zach appraisingly. "You must be skilled if Richard sought you out." "I do my best," Zach replied modestly. "Well, you must stay for supper at the very least," William insisted. "It's the least I can offer the man who saved my niece." Zach glanced at Madeline, then nodded. "I'd be honored, sir." The ranch house was rustic but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and colorful quilts that softened the rough-hewn timber walls. Rosa, the housekeeper, fussed over Madeline, insisting she bathe and change before doing anything else. "You look half-drowned, señorita," the older woman scolded gently, leading her to a bedroom at the back of the house. "What were you thinking, crossing that river alone?" "I've learned my lesson, Rosa," Madeline assured her, grateful for the copper tub of steaming water that awaited her. While Madeline bathed and changed into fresh clothes, William showed Zach around the ranch. From her bedroom window, she could see them walking among the corrals, deep in conversation. Her uncle gestured enthusiastically, and even from a distance, she could tell he was impressed with whatever Zach was saying. By the time supper was served, Madeline felt human again. She donned a simple blue dress that complemented her auburn hair, which now fell in loose waves around her shoulders, having dried naturally after her bath. Zach had evidently been offered similar hospitality. His clothes were clean, his dark hair damp and neatly combed. when his eyes met hers across the dining room. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared memory of danger and rescue that bound them together. The meal was lively, with William eager to hear about Denver and family news. Zach contributed occasionally to the conversation, revealing a quick wit and intelligence that further intrigued Madeline. "So, Mr. Eaton," William said as they enjoyed coffee and apple pie, "how long will you be at the Triple R?" "Richard's hired me for at least a month," Zach replied. "He's got a dozen horses that need training, including a stallion that's apparently been giving his hands trouble." William nodded knowingly. "That would be Thunder, I suspect. Magnificent animal, but wilder than a March hare. Richard was considering putting him down after he injured two of his men." "Sounds like a challenge," Zach said, his eyes lighting with interest rather than concern. "Richard's place is just over that ridge," William said, pointing westward through the window. "Hardly more than 3 miles as the crow flies. Perhaps you'd consider looking at my stock while you're in the area. I've a mare with similar temperament issues." Madeline observed the interaction with growing suspicion. Her uncle was being unusually accommodating to a stranger, regardless of his role in saving her life. After supper, while Rosa cleared the dishes, William invited Zach to join him for a cigar on the porch. Madeline followed, settling into a rocking chair as the men lit their cigars. "Mr. Eaton," William began, "I have a proposition for you." Zach raised an eyebrow but waited for the older man to continue. "I've been meaning to improve my stables," William explained. "I've acquired some new breeding stock, but I need someone who understands horses to help evaluate them and start their training. Richard speaks highly of your abilities, and after our conversation today, I'm inclined to agree with his assessment." Madeline's suspicion crystallized into certainty. Her uncle had clearly sent word to Richard before she'd even arrived, inquiring about Zach. This wasn't a spontaneous offer. "What exactly are you proposing?" Zach asked cautiously. "Stay at Copper Creek while you're working with Richard's horses," William suggested. "We've plenty of room, and you'd be more comfortable here than in the bunkhouse at Triple R. In exchange, perhaps you could spend some time with my horses when you're not at Richard's place." Zach considered the offer, his eyes briefly meeting Madeline's. "That's generous, Mr. Vance, but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," William waved away the concern. "It would be a convenience for us both, and I suspect my niece would appreciate having someone closer to her age around the ranch. Most of my hands are old-timers who wouldn't know what to talk about with a young lady from the city." So that was it, Madeline thought. Her uncle was playing matchmaker, just as her mother had in Denver. The realization should have annoyed her, but instead, she felt a flutter of anticipation at the thought of Zach remaining at Copper Creek. "If Miss Vance has no objection," Zach said, looking directly at her, "I'd be happy to accept your hospitality." All eyes turned to Madeline, who managed a casual shrug despite her quickening pulse. "Why would I object? Mr. Eaton has proven himself to be good company in a crisis. I imagine he'll be equally agreeable under normal circumstances." A smile tugged at the corner of Zach's mouth. "High praise indeed, Miss Vance." William clapped his hands together, clearly pleased. "Excellent. It's settled then. Rosa will prepare the guest room for you tonight, and you can ride over to see Richard in the morning." As the evening progressed, Madeline found herself increasingly aware of Zach's presence, the deep timbre of his laugh, the graceful economy of his movements, the way his eyes seemed to find hers across the room. When she finally retired for the night, her dreams were filled with rushing water and strong arms pulling her to safety. The next morning, Zach departed early for the Triple R, promising to return by supper. Madeline spent the day reacquainting herself with the ranch, visiting the kitchen garden with Rosa, and meeting the various hands who managed the cattle and horses. She was in the stable, admiring a copper-colored mare with a flaxen mane, when her uncle found her. "That's Penny," William said, approaching the stall, "the one I mentioned to Mr. Eaton. Beautiful, isn't she? But she's got a temper that makes her dangerous to ride." Madeline stroked the mare's velvet nose. "She seems gentle enough now." "Deceptive," William warned. "She's thrown every rider who's attempted to mount her. I'm hoping Mr. Eaton can work his magic with her." "You seem very confident in his abilities," Madeline observed, giving him a sidelong glance, despite having just met him. William had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have heard of him before yesterday," he admitted. "His reputation with horses is well known in certain circles." "And inviting him to stay here? Was that also based on his reputation with horses?" Madeline pressed, though her tone remained light. Her uncle chuckled. "Can't fault an old man for recognizing a good prospect when he sees one, Maddie. He saved your life. He's clearly capable and honorable, and he's not hard on the eyes from what I can tell." "Uncle William!" Madeline exclaimed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Just making observations," William said innocently. "But if you'd prefer I ask him to stay at the Triple R instead." "I didn't say that," Madeline replied, a little too quickly. "I simply object to being managed, whether by my mother or by you." William placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No management intended, my dear. Just creating opportunities. What comes of them or doesn't is entirely up to you and Mr. Eaton." Madeline couldn't maintain her indignation in the face of her uncle's sincerity. "Very well," she conceded. "But please don't be obvious about it. Mr. Eaton deserves better than to be manipulated into courting someone he's only just met." "Fair enough," William agreed, "though I suspect he wouldn't need much manipulation. I saw how he looked at you at supper." Before Madeline could inquire further about this intriguing observation, the sound of hoofbeats announced a rider approaching the stable. Zach dismounted, looking tired but satisfied. "How was your first day?" William called, stepping away from Madeline. "Productive," Zach replied, leading his horse into the stable. "Richard's got some fine animals, though that stallion Thunder is going to be a challenge. He nearly took my head off when I entered his stall." "But you'll persist?" William asked. "Of course," Zach said, as if the question were absurd. "He's testing boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. Establishing trust will take time." His eyes found Madeline, and his expression softened. "Miss Vance, I trust you had a restful day after your ordeal." "Quite restful, thank you," she replied, suddenly conscious of her simple riding clothes and wind-blown hair. "Though nowhere near as exciting as dodging dangerous stallions." Zach grinned. "One near-death experience per week seems sufficient, don't you think?" William looked between them with barely concealed approval. "I'll leave you two to discuss the merits of danger. Supper will be ready soon, and I need to clean up." He departed with a knowing wink at Madeline that made her want to sink into the stable floor. Once they were alone, Zach approached the stall where Madeline stood with Penny. The mare's ears flicked forward with interest. "This must be the troublesome lady your uncle mentioned," Zach said, extending his hand slowly for the horse to sniff. "Penny," Madeline confirmed. "Apparently she objects to being ridden." Zach studied the mare thoughtfully. Many horses do until they understand what's being asked of them. It's rarely defiance for its own sake, usually fear or confusion. "You speak as if they're people," Madeline observed. "Not people," Zach corrected, "but thinking, feeling creatures with their own perspectives. Ignore that, and you'll never earn their trust." He stroked Penny's neck gently. "Would you like to learn how to approach her properly?" The question surprised Madeline. "You'd teach me." "Why not?" Zach replied. "You struck me as someone who enjoys learning new things. Was I mistaken?" "No," Madeline said, intrigued by the offer. "I'd like that very much." "Good," Zach said with a smile that reached his eyes. "We'll start tomorrow if your uncle approves." As they walked back to the house together, Madeline realized this summer at Copper Creek might be far more interesting than she had anticipated. The days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Each morning, Zach would ride to the Triple R to work with Richard's horses. He'd return by mid-afternoon, then spend time with Penny and the other horses at Copper Creek. True to his word, he began teaching Madeline his methods. "Horses are prey animals," he explained during their first lesson. "They're always alert for danger. Quick movements, loud noises, direct eye contact, these can all be perceived as threats." Madeline absorbed his instructions eagerly. learning to approach Penny with calm confidence, to speak softly but clearly, to use gentle but consistent pressure when asking the mare to yield. "You have good instincts," Zach observed one evening as they groomed Penny together. "Most people try to dominate horses. You're naturally inclined to communicate instead." The compliment warmed Madeline more than it should have. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd found herself increasingly drawn to Zach's company, looking forward to their daily sessions with the horses and the conversations that followed. They spoke of books — he was surprisingly well read for a cowboy — of places they'd visited — his travels had taken him far beyond Texas — of their hopes and disappointments. He told her about losing his parents to influenza when he was 17, about working cattle drives to earn enough money to buy his first horse. She shared her frustrations with societal expectations, her desire to find purpose beyond being someone's wife. "Not that I object to marriage," she clarified one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I simply want it to be a partnership, not an arrangement." Zach nodded thoughtfully. "My parents had that kind of marriage, equal in everything that mattered. Pa used to say Ma was the best decision he ever made." "They sound wonderful," Madeline said softly. They were. A shadow of old grief crossed his face. "They taught me what to look for when the time comes." "And have you found it?" The question slipped out before Madeline could consider its implications. Zach's eyes met hers, steady and clear in the fading light. "I believe I might be getting closer," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then Rosa called them in for supper, breaking the spell. That night, Madeline lay awake, replaying the exchange in her mind. Was she being foolish, reading too much into casual words? Or was there truly something growing between them, something worth pursuing? The next day brought a change in routine. William announced at breakfast that he needed to ride into town for supplies and would be gone overnight. "Will you two be all right without me?" he asked, his innocent tone belied by the twinkle in his eye. "Rosa will be here," Madeline pointed out, ignoring her uncle's poorly disguised matchmaking. "And the hands are just a shout away if needed." "Of course," William agreed, gathering his hat and gloves. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Try not to tame all the wild horses while I'm gone, Mr. Eaton." After her uncle's departure, Madeline went about her morning routine, trying not to watch the clock until Zach would return from the R. When he finally rode in shortly after midday, she was surprised to see him leading another horse, a magnificent black stallion with a single white star on his forehead. "Thunder?" she asked incredulously as Zach dismounted in the yard. "The very same," he confirmed, patting the stallion's muscular neck. "Richard's given me permission to work with him here, where there are fewer distractions." The stallion snorted and pawed at the ground, but he remained beside Zach without restraint beyond a simple lead rope. "He seems different from what you described," Madeline observed, maintaining a safe distance. Zach smiled proudly. "We've made progress. Still a long way to go, but he's starting to trust me." He looked around the empty yard. "Where's your uncle?" "Gone to town until tomorrow," Madeline replied. "Supply run," he said. Something flickered in Zach's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "I see. Well, I should get Thunder settled. Would you like to help?" They spent the afternoon working with both Thunder and Penny. Under Zach's guidance, Madeline gained confidence in handling the stallion, though she remained appropriately cautious. "You're a natural," Zach praised as she successfully led Thunder around the corral. "He respects you." "He respects you," Madeline corrected. "I'm just benefiting from your influence." Zach shook his head. "Don't sell yourself short. Horses sense intention and emotion. They know when someone is genuine." As evening approached, Madeline realized they were facing an unusual situation dining alone together, without her uncle's mediating presence. Rosa would serve the meal, of course, but she always ate in the kitchen and retired early. Dinner was a simpler affair than usual, but the conversation flowed easily. They discussed the day's progress with the horses, Zach's experiences on cattle drives, Madeline's life in Boston and Denver. "Do you miss city life?" Zach asked as they lingered over coffee and Rosa's apple cobbler. Madeline considered the question. "Parts of it," she admitted, "the theaters, the bookshops. But there's a freedom here that doesn't exist in the city. Fewer eyes watching, fewer judgments." "And yet you'll return eventually," Zach observed, his tone carefully neutral. "My parents expect it," Madeline said, though the prospect suddenly seemed less appealing than it had a month ago. "My visit here was always meant to be temporary." Zach nodded, his eyes dropping to his coffee cup. "Of course." After dinner, with Rosa retired for the evening, they moved to the porch. The night was warm, the sky ablaze with stars brighter than any Madeline had seen in the city. A crescent moon hung low on the horizon, casting silver light across the landscape. "I never tire of this view," Zach said, leaning against the porch railing. "Makes a man feel small and significant all at once." "How so?" Madeline asked, settling into the rocking chair nearby. "Small because the sky is so vast," he explained, gesturing upward. "Significant because we're here to witness it, to understand our place within it." The insight surprised her, revealing yet another layer to this man who continued to defy her expectations. "You're not what I imagined when I first saw you pulling me from the river," Madeline confessed. "I thought you were just a cowboy," Zach supplied with a smile. "I was going to say, just passing through," Madeline corrected. "But yes, I suppose I had certain assumptions about cowboys that you've thoroughly disproven." "I hope that's a good thing," Zach said, turning to face her fully. "It is," Madeline assured him, "a very good thing." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Zach took a step toward her, then hesitated. "Madeline," he began, her given name sounding intimate on his lips. "I know we haven't known each other long, but—" A thunderous crash from the stable interrupted him, followed by the unmistakable sound of a horse in distress. They both jumped to attention. "Thunder!" Zach exclaimed, already moving toward the noise. Madeline hurried after him, grabbing a lantern from its hook by the door. The stable was in chaos. Thunder had somehow broken free of his stall and was rearing and plunging in the central aisle, eyes wild with fear. The other horses were agitated, neighing and kicking at their stall doors. "Stay back," Zach warned, assessing the situation rapidly. "What happened?" Madeline asked, holding the lantern high. "Something must have spooked him," Zach replied, cautiously approaching the panicked stallion. "Easy, boy," he called softly. "Easy now." Thunder wheeled toward the sound of Zach's voice, nostrils flaring. For a moment, it seemed the horse would calm. Then, a barn owl swooped through the open stable door, and Thunder bolted, charging straight past Zach toward the exit and Madeline. "Madeline, move!" Zach shouted. She tried to step aside, but her skirt caught on a nail protruding from a post. As Thunder barreled toward her, Zach lunged forward, pushing her clear of the stallion's path. They fell together, Zach twisting to take the brunt of the impact as they hit the stable floor. Thunder thundered past, disappearing into the night. Madeline found herself pressed against Zach's chest, his arms protectively around her. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, his breath warm against her ear. "No," she managed, her heart racing from more than just the near miss. "Are you?" "Just winded," Zach assured her, loosening his hold but not releasing her entirely. That was too close. In the golden glow of the fallen lantern, which had miraculously remained lit, their faces were inches apart. Madeline could see the concern in Zach's eyes, the relief that she was unharmed in something else, something that made her breath catch. Without conscious thought, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that started tentatively, but quickly deepened as Zach responded, one hand rising to cradle her face. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing unevenly. Zach's eyes searched hers, asking a silent question. "I'm not sorry," Madeline whispered, answering before he could speak. A slow smile spread across Zach's face. "Neither am I," he admitted, "though your uncle might have my hide if he knew I was kissing you on a stable floor." The absurdity of their position suddenly struck Madeline, and she laughed, the sound bright in the quiet stable. Zach joined her, then helped her to her feet, brushing straw from her dress with careful hands. "We should find Thunder," he said reluctantly. He could hurt himself out there, especially in the dark. Reality intruded on the moment, and Madeline nodded. "Of course. I'll help you search." They spent the next hour combing the nearby pastures, calling for the stallion. They finally found him at the far edge of the property, standing rigidly beside the creek that gave the ranch its name. This time, when Zach approached, Thunder didn't bolt. The stallion allowed himself to be captured and led back to the stable, though his muscles trembled with residual fear. "He's still spooked," Zach observed as they secured him in his stall. "I'll stay here tonight to make sure he settles." Disappointment flickered through Madeline, though she understood the necessity. "I'll bring you some blankets," she offered. When she returned with blankets and a pillow from the house, Zach had arranged a makeshift bed of clean straw near Thunder's stall. He accepted the bedding with a grateful smile. "Not quite the evening I had in mind," he said ruefully. Madeline gathered her courage. "What did you have in mind?" she asked, her voice soft in the quiet stable. Zach set down the blankets and stepped closer. "I was planning to tell you how much these past weeks have meant to me," he said, his eyes holding hers. "How I've come to admire your courage, your intelligence, your compassion." Madeline's heart thundered in her chest. "And what else?" she prompted. "I was going to ask if you might consider extending your stay at Copper Creek," Zach continued, taking another step toward her. "Or if not, if you might allow me to call on you in Denver when my work here is done." "You want to court me?" Madeline clarified, hardly believing what she was hearing. "I do," Zach confirmed, his expression earnest. "If you'll permit it." Instead of answering with words, Madeline closed the distance between them and kissed him again, pouring all her newfound feelings into the gesture. Zach's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I'll take that as a yes," he murmured. Madeline smiled against his lips. "A definite yes," she confirmed, "though we should probably have this conversation somewhere more proper than a stable before my uncle returns." Zach chuckled. "Agreed. Tomorrow, then?" "Tomorrow," Madeline echoed, reluctantly stepping back. "Good night, Zach." "Good night, Madeline," he replied, his voice warm with promise. She returned to the house with a lightness in her step that had nothing to do with the evening breeze and everything to do with the man she'd left in the stable. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Madeline rose early, eager to see Zach again and continue their interrupted conversation. She found him already at work in the corral, lunging Thunder on a long lead rope, encouraging the stallion to move in circles around him. "He seems calmer today," she observed, approaching the fence. Zach looked up with a smile that made her heart skip. "Amazing what a night's rest can do," he agreed, though his eyes told her he was speaking of more than just the horse. After breakfast, Zach suggested they ride to the creek to check the fences along the property line. The morning was pleasant, and Madeline readily agreed, glad for the opportunity to speak privately. They rode side by side, Zach on his gelding and Madeline on a gentle mare from her uncle's stable. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on everyday matters before eventually circling back to the previous evening. "I meant what I said last night," Zach said as they dismounted near the creek to let the horses drink. "About courting you." Madeline smiled, feeling strangely shy despite their kisses. "And I meant my answer. But I should warn you, my mother has very specific ideas about suitable matches." "And I don't meet her criteria," Zach guessed, leading his horse to the water's edge. "You're not a banker or a lawyer or a business associate of my father's," Madeline acknowledged, "but that's precisely why I find you so refreshing." Zach laughed, the sound echoing across the water. "Refreshing, am I? Like a cool drink on a hot day?" "More like a plunge into a river when you least expect it," Madeline teased, referencing their first meeting. "Shocking at first, but ultimately invigorating." They settled on a grassy bank beneath a cottonwood tree, watching their horses graze nearby. Zach reached for her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both new and somehow familiar. "What happens when summer ends?" he asked after a comfortable silence. It was the question Madeline had been asking herself since their kiss. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm expected in Denver for my cousin's wedding in September, and then you'll be paraded before more suitable suitors," Zach finished for her, a hint of resignation in his tone. "Unless I have a compelling reason to decline their attentions," Madeline suggested, squeezing his hand, "such as a prior attachment." Hope brightened Zach's eyes. "Is that what this is? An attachment?" "It's becoming one," Madeline said honestly. "I've never felt this way before, this combination of comfort and excitement. It's as if I've known you much longer than a few weeks." "I feel it too," Zach confessed. "From the moment I pulled you from that river, something connected us." He leaned closer, and Madeline met him halfway, their lips finding each other in a kiss that felt like coming home. Unlike their previous kisses, this one was unhurried, a slow exploration that left them both breathless when they finally parted. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Madeline Vance," Zach murmured against her hair. The words sent a thrill through her. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, Zachary Eaton," she whispered back. They might have remained there all day, lost in each other's company, if not for the distant sound of hoofbeats. They separated reluctantly as William Vance rode into view, returning from town earlier than expected. "There you are," William called, approaching with a friendly wave. "Checking the south fences, Mr. Eaton?" "Yes, sir," Zach replied, standing to greet him. "And showing your niece some of the more scenic spots on your property." William's knowing gaze moved between them, taking in their flushed faces and the minimal distance between them. "I see," he said, a smile tugging at his mustache. "Find anything of interest?" "The view is spectacular," Madeline said, not entirely referring to the landscape. "Indeed it is," her uncle agreed, dismounting. "I've always thought this was one of the most beautiful spots on the ranch." He unsaddled his horse, then turned to Zach with an innocent expression. "By the way, Mr. Eaton, I ran into Richard in town. He mentioned you've made remarkable progress with Thunder." "The stallion has a good heart beneath his fear," Zach replied modestly. "He just needed someone to listen to him." "Richard was so impressed, in fact, that he's considering offering you a permanent position at the RRR," William continued, "as his head trainer with a share in future breeding stock." Madeline's heart sank. The RRR was nearly 50 miles from Denver, too far for regular visits, yet close enough to Copper Creek that Zach would be firmly rooted in the area. "That's quite an opportunity," Zach said carefully, his eyes finding Madeline's. "It certainly is," William agreed, "though I told Richard I might make you a counteroffer." Both Zach and Madeline turned to him in surprise. "I've been thinking of expanding my horse breeding operation," William explained. "Copper Creek has the water and grazing land to support it. What I lack is someone with your expertise, Mr. Eaton." "You're offering me a position here?" Zach asked, clearly stunned. "A partnership, actually," William clarified. "You'd manage the horse operation, train the stock, make breeding decisions. You'd live in the foreman's cabin. It needs some work, but it's a solid structure with room to expand." The implication was clear. William was offering Zach not just employment, but a future, a place to build a life. "That's extremely generous, Mr. Vance," Zach said, visibly moved by the offer. "I'm not being generous, I'm being practical," William replied. "You have a gift with horses, and I'd be a fool not to try to keep that gift at Copper Creek." His eyes twinkled as he added, "The fact that my niece seems quite taken with you is a happy coincidence." "Uncle William," Madeline protested, blushing furiously. "What?" William asked innocently. "Am I mistaken?" Zach cleared his throat. "You're not mistaken, sir," he said, standing taller. "I care deeply for your niece, and I was planning to speak with you about my intentions toward her." "Were you now?" William's expression grew more serious. "And what exactly are those intentions, Mr. Eaton?" "Honorable ones," Zach assured him. "I know we haven't known each other long. but I believe what's growing between us is real and lasting. I'd like your blessing to court Madeline properly." William stroked his beard thoughtfully. "And if her parents object? Herbert and Eleanor Vance move in different circles than cowboys and ranchers." "Then I'll work to prove myself worthy," Zach said simply. "I may not have their social standing, but I can offer Madeline a good life, one filled with respect and love." Madeline's heart swelled at his words. She stepped forward to stand beside him, taking his hand boldly in hers. "I'm old enough to make my own choices, Uncle William, and I choose Zach." William looked between them, his expression softening. "Well then," he said finally, "I suppose I'd better write to your parents, Madeline. It seems Copper Creek may be hosting a wedding before the year is out." "Uncle William," Madeline exclaimed again, though this time with less mortification and more hope, "we're only just beginning to court." "At my age, child, one learns to recognize the real thing when one sees it," William replied sagely. "But I'll leave the timing to you two." He mounted his horse again. "I'll expect you both for supper. Rose is making her special chicken and dumplings to celebrate my return." As William rode away, Madeline turned to Zach. "He's getting ahead of himself," she said apologetically. "Is he?" Zach asked, his expression suddenly serious. "Because I meant what I said about my intentions, Madeline. I know it's too soon by society's standards, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He took both her hands in his. "I'm not proposing today," he clarified, "but I want you to know that's where my heart is heading. If you need time or if you have doubts," Madeline silenced him with a kiss. "No doubts," she assured him when they parted. "Just amazement at how quickly life can change. A month ago, I was dreading another season of formal dinners and polite conversations with men my mother deemed suitable. Now I'm standing by a creek with a cowboy who saved my life and stole my heart." Zach's smile was radiant. "When you put it that way, it does sound like a story no one would believe." "Perhaps," Madeline agreed, "but it's our story, and I have a feeling it's only just beginning." Summer unfurled in a golden haze of joy. Madeline watched in admiration as Zach transformed her uncle's modest stable into the beginnings of a respectable breeding operation. He worked tirelessly, dividing his time between training Richard's horses and improving William's stock, yet he always made time for her. Their courtship flourished under William's approving eye. They rode together daily, exploring the far reaches of Copper Creek. Zach taught Madeline more about horses than she'd ever imagined there was to know, and she introduced him to favorite books and music, reading aloud in the evenings while he whittled or repaired tack. News of their courtship reached Denver, resulting in a flurry of concerned letters from Madeline's mother. Eleanor Vance's initial horror at her daughter's involvement with a common horseman gradually softened as William wrote of Zach's character and business acumen. By August, Zach had moved into the foreman's cabin, which he'd renovated with his own hands. The simple structure now boasted a stone fireplace, polished wood floors, and a small front porch, where they often sat in the evenings watching the sunset. "It's coming along nicely," Madeline observed one evening as they rocked side by side on the porch. "It still needs work," Zach replied, surveying his handiwork critically. "The roof should be replaced before winter, and the kitchen is barely functional." "It's perfect," Madeline insisted, leaning her head against his shoulder, "though it does seem rather large for one person." Zach's arm tightened around her. "I was hoping it wouldn't be for just one person indefinitely," he said, his voice husky with emotion. The unspoken proposal hung in the air between them. They had discussed marriage obliquely, speaking of future plans that clearly included each other, but neither had formally addressed the subject since their conversation by the creek. "Zach," Madeline began hesitantly, "I'm expected in Denver next week for Amanda's wedding. My mother's letter suggests she's still hopeful I'll reconsider my frontier infatuation, as she calls it." Zach stiffened slightly. "And will you? Reconsider, I mean." Madeline turned to face him fully. "No," she said firmly. "But I think it's time we made our intentions clear to everyone, not just ourselves and Uncle William." Understanding dawned in Zach's eyes. He rose from his chair and, to Madeline's surprise, dropped to one knee before her. "I had planned to do this with more ceremony," he admitted, taking her hand in his. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment." From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet pouch. Opening it, he shook a ring into his palm, a simple gold band set with a modest diamond that caught the dying sunlight. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Pa gave it to me before he passed, said I should save it for the woman who captured my heart the way Ma captured his." Tears welled in Madeline's eyes. "Zach." "Madeline Vance," he continued, his gaze steady despite the vulnerability in his expression. "You fell into my life as unexpectedly as you fell into that river, and just as I couldn't let you drown then, I can't imagine letting you go now. Will you marry me? Not because your uncle approves or despite your mother, but because you believe, as I do, that we're meant to face life's currents together?" The tears spilled onto Madeline's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zachary Eaton, I will marry you." Zach slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. Then he gathered her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of shared adventures. When they told William that evening, his pleasure was evident. "About time," he declared, pouring whiskey to celebrate. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the stable together to get some action." "Uncle William!" Madeline exclaimed, though she was too happy to be truly scandalized. "When's the wedding?" William asked, passing glasses around. Madeline and Zach exchanged looks. "We haven't discussed details yet," Zach admitted. "Though I was thinking perhaps October," Madeline added, "after I return from Denver. The aspen trees will be golden then, and the weather still mild enough for an outdoor ceremony." "October it is," William declared, raising his glass. "To the future, Mr. and Mrs. Eaton. May your lives together be as boundless as these Colorado skies and as steadfast as these mountains." "To us," Zach echoed, touching his glass to Madeline's. "To us," she agreed, marveling at how completely her life had transformed in the space of a single summer. The journey to Denver a week later was bittersweet. Madeline was eager to share her happiness with her cousin Amanda, but dreaded confronting her mother's disapproval face to face. Zach rode with her to the stagecoach station, his farewell kiss lingering with promise. 2 weeks, he reminded her as she boarded. Then you'll be back and we'll begin planning our future in earnest. 2 weeks, she echoed, already counting the days until her return. Denver was a shock after the open spaces of Copper Creek. The city seemed crowded, the air thick with coal smoke, the constant noise jarring after months of rural quiet. Her parents' home, once the pinnacle of comfort in her mind, now felt stifling with its heavy draperies and formal parlors. Eleanor Vance's reaction to the engagement ring was predictably dismayed. "A horse trainer, Madeline, really? After all the suitable young men we've introduced you to?" "He's more than that, Mother," Madeline defended. "He's building a partnership with Uncle William, developing a breeding program that will make Copper Creek one of the premier horse ranches in Colorado." "That may be," Eleanor conceded reluctantly. "But is that the life you want? So far from civilization, from culture, from everything you've been raised to appreciate?" Madeline considered the question honestly. "It is," she realized aloud. "I've found more genuine connection, more purpose, more joy at Copper Creek than I ever experienced in Boston or Denver. Zach challenges me to be braver, to look beyond conventions, to trust my own judgment." Her mother's expression softened slightly. "You truly love him then? This isn't just rebellion against our expectations?" "I truly love him," Madeline confirmed, "and he loves me not as an ornament or a suitable match, but as a partner." Eleanor sighed, accepting defeat with as much grace as she could muster. "Then I suppose we should invite him to dinner when he arrives for the wedding. Your father will want to meet the man who's stolen his daughter's heart." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations for Amanda, whose marriage to the son of a railroad magnate was the social event of the season. Madeline performed her duties as bridesmaid diligently, all while counting the days until Zach's arrival. When he finally appeared at her parents' doorstep, Madeline hardly recognized him at first. Gone was the casual attire of the ranch. In its place, Zach wore a well-tailored suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. His hair was neatly trimmed, his boots polished to a mirror shine. "You look—" Madeline searched for words as she greeted him in the foyer. "Uncomfortable?" Zach suggested with a rueful smile, tugging at his collar. "I thought your parents might appreciate the effort, though I draw the line at those ridiculous bowler hats everyone seems to be wearing." Madeline laughed, her heart overflowing with love for this man who would endure discomfort for her sake. "You look handsome," she corrected, rising on tiptoes to kiss his cheek, "though I prefer you in your everyday clothes." "Noted," Zach replied, his eyes warm as they took in her elegant dinner dress. "You, however, look beautiful in anything." The dinner with her parents went better than Madeline had dared hope. Herbert Vance, initially reserved, warmed considerably to Zach when their conversation turned to business. By dessert, the two men were deep in discussion about breeding stock and market potential, while Eleanor observed with grudging approval. "He's not what I expected," her mother admitted later that evening as Madeline prepared for bed. "There's an intelligence and dignity about him that I find surprising." "Because he's a cowboy?" Madeline asked, unable to keep a hint of challenge from her voice. "Yes," Eleanor answered honestly. "I had a different vision for your future, Madeline. But I can see that he makes you happy in a way none of the men we introduced you to ever did." It was as close to a blessing as Madeline was likely to get, and she accepted it gratefully. Amanda's wedding was a lavish affair, with hundreds of guests, mountains of flowers, and enough food to feed a small army. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Madeline found her thoughts drifting to her own upcoming wedding, simpler, more intimate, but infinitely more meaningful to her. When they returned to Copper Creek in early October, the land was transformed. Aspen trees blazed gold against the evergreens, their leaves shimmering in the breeze like thousands of golden coins. The air held a crispness that promised winter's approach, though the days remained warm and clear. The wedding preparations proceeded with surprising ease. Rosa took charge of the food, planning a feast that combined traditional American dishes with Mexican specialties from her own heritage. William insisted on providing the finest Kentucky bourbon for toasts. Neighboring ranchers and their families were invited, along with the hands from both Copper Creek and the Triple R. To Madeline's surprise and gratitude, her parents arrived 3 days before the ceremony, having made the journey from Denver despite Eleanor's initial reluctance. Her mother immediately involved herself in the final arrangements, her organizational skills proving invaluable. On the morning of the wedding, Madeline stood at her bedroom window, watching the sunrise paint the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. In a few hours, she would become Mrs. Zachary Eaton, beginning a new chapter in a story that had started with a dangerous river crossing. Her mother entered with a rustle of silk, carrying a white box tied with blue ribbon. "I have something for you," Eleanor said, setting the box on the bed. Inside lay a delicate veil of Brussels lace, yellowed slightly with age. "This was my grandmother's, and then mine," Eleanor explained, lifting the fragile material. "I always hoped you would wear it on your wedding day." Tears pricked Madeline's eyes. "It's beautiful, Mother. Thank you." As Eleanor carefully arranged the veil over Madeline's upswept hair, their eyes met in the mirror. "You're sure about this?" her mother asked, one final confirmation. "More sure than I've ever been about anything," Madeline replied without hesitation. Eleanor's hands rested briefly on her daughter's shoulders. "Then I wish you joy, my dear. The kind of joy that sustains through both calm waters and rough currents." The ceremony took place beside the creek, where cottonwood leaves drifted down like golden snowflakes. Zach waited beneath an arch of autumn branches, looking handsome in a new suit that somehow seemed more natural on him than the one he'd worn in Denver. William escorted Madeline from the house, proudly serving as her surrogate father with Herbert's blessing. When Zach saw her approaching in her simple white dress adorned with her mother's veil, his expression of wonder and love made every challenge they'd faced worthwhile. The vows they exchanged were traditional but heartfelt, each word invested with genuine commitment. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zach's kiss conveyed promises beyond those they'd spoken aloud, promises of partnership, respect, adventure, and unwavering love. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to satisfy even the hungriest ranch hands. As twilight settled over Copper Creek, Zach led Madeline away from the festivities toward the creek where they'd first acknowledged their feelings. "Happy, Mrs. Eaton?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "Completely," she assured him, resting her head against his chest. "Though it still feels strange to hear my new name." "You'll have time to get used to it," Zach promised, his voice vibrating beneath her ear. "A lifetime, in fact." They stood together in the gathering darkness, listening to the gentle gurgle of the creek and the distant sounds of celebration. "Do you ever think about that day on the Colorado?" Madeline asked suddenly. "How different our lives might be if you hadn't been there when I fell in." Zach's arms tightened around her. "I try not to," he admitted. "The thought of losing you before I even knew you." He shook his head, unable to complete the thought. "When you called out to me to kick with you, to keep fighting," Madeline recalled, "it was your voice that gave me strength. Even before I knew your name, I trusted you." "And I knew, even as I pulled you from that river, that you were someone worth saving," Zach replied. "Not just then, but every day since." They sealed this renewed understanding with a kiss as the first stars appeared above them, bearing witness to a love born in danger and nurtured in the wild beauty of the Colorado frontier. In the years that followed, Copper Creek flourished under their combined vision. Zach's expertise with horses attracted buyers from across the country, while Madeline's business acumen and education helped transform their operation into one of the most respected in the territory. The foreman's cabin expanded into a comfortable home filled with books, music, and eventually the laughter of children, first a son with Zach's eyes and Madeline's determined spirit, then twin daughters who inherited their father's way with horses and their mother's love of literature. Life wasn't always easy. Droughts, harsh winters, economic downturns, and the everyday challenges of ranch life tested their resilience. But through it all, they faced each obstacle as they had faced the river's current that first day together, fighting side by side, never giving up. On their 20th anniversary, they returned to the spot on the Colorado River where they'd first met. The crossing was safer now, with a sturdy bridge spanning the water, but the river itself remained wild and beautiful. "Would you do it all again?" Zach asked as they stood hand in hand, watching the current that had brought them together. "Knowing all the hardships, all the struggles we'd face?" Madeline looked up at the man who had been her partner in all things for 2 decades, his face more weathered now, silver threading through his dark hair, but his eyes still as blue and clear as the Colorado sky. "Without hesitation," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Every moment, from the day I fell into that river to this very second, has been worth it." Zach's smile was as warm and genuine as it had been on their wedding day. "Then I'd say we've been luckier than most, Mrs. Eaton." "Not luck," Madeline corrected gently. "Choice. We chose to keep kicking, to never stop fighting for each other, for our dreams, for the life we've built together." As they turned to ride back to Copper Creek, where their children and the life they'd created awaited them, Madeline felt the same certainty that had filled her heart when she'd accepted Zach's proposal all those years ago. Some loves were simply meant to be as inevitable and powerful as the river's current, as enduring as the mountains themselves.